Okay, welcome back to the Pando Days 2023 premieres. It's been a great morning so far, and we expect great things to come. Up next, California State University Fullerton, a pioneering Pando Days entrant from Orange County. We hope there are more to come. Cal State Fullerton is taking on a hugely important issue and one that's all too close to us all. We see evidence of it every day, and for many, many students, it's a reality they're living with: food insecurity. With insight that comes from personal experience, the Fullerton team decided to do something about it. I'll let them tell you what it is. There are 3 team leads, all of them students, which warms my heart as I too spent my college years focused on project-based work of various kinds. The students, Rohan Kunchala, Alan Cortez, and Cesar Rojas, with faculty advisor Professor Jeff Greenberg. Okay, team, take it away.
All right, guys, thanks for having us. Let us know when you can see our presentation. Is it visible? Okay. All right. So my name is Rohan, Cesar Rojas, Alan Cortez, and today we'll be talking about tackling food insecurity the nerdy way. So Feeding America describes food insecurity as being when people can't access the food they need to live their fullest lives. We really like this definition, and it encapsulates what this is all about. 53 million Americans rely on food banks and pantries on an annual basis. This is from the latest US Census in 2022. But I want to be a little bit more specific, hone in on LA. And talking about Los Angeles, a study by USC showed in December of 2021, 16.6% of LA County was considered food insecure. Now, moving 6 months later, July 2022, that number increased to 24.3%. That's about 8 percentage points. And I think it just goes to show you that this is all around us. This is folks that you and I may know, and we're just not aware of what they're going through. It's a very persistent issue. So talking about the ecosystem surrounding this, how are we addressing this? Well, traditionally, it's food banks, the large wholesale distributors of food who have large inventories of food that they then pass on to pantries. Pantries are local neighborhood sites where you and I might go to get these products produced for our family, put it on the table. So this is the traditional model. It goes banks to pantry to the community itself. The pantries come in many various forms. It can be soup kitchens, it can be mobile pantries, brick and mortar pantries, but the model stays more or less the same. So to talk a little bit more in depth of banks.
This is currently what the food bank network looks like. So we know there are about 370 food banks and well over 100,000 food pantries in the United States now. And within this network, there exists an entity called Feeding America. And they have partnered about 200 food banks and 60,000 food pantries with them. And what this really means is that these agencies are disseminating training guides, information, and software, though all these entities may not use it. So touching a little bit on the issues at hand, food banks, large entities, are on average partnered with about 150 food pantries, and they suffer from communication issues almost across the board, since they rely on email and phone calls to communicate all those food pantries. And this limits the data that's available, data that can be used for forecasting, and currently they usually rely on historical data. And in our conversations with food banks, the same issues cropped up of delivery logistics. And whether it be like the delivery driver is late or misses pickups with their partner agencies, it could tarnish the relationships they've fostered. And these issues in combination can lead to food wastage at the food bank level, or even shortage where they don't have enough to supply their partner pantries. And on this slide here, we can see an HTML form for large parties that want to volunteer at a food bank. And one of the issues here is that this requires a paid staff member from the food bank to go out, go through it, and reach back out to this large party, which can disincentivize people from actually helping out. And the issue here is this comes from the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank, but that by revenue is one of the top 10 food banks in the United States. And here, food pantries, the one actually giving the food to the community, they kind of exist in 3 distinct forms. So we know they have a brick and mortar, they can have drive-throughs, or usually pop-up pantries. And they largely lack client choice, either because they're lacking software or they have poor volunteer management. And many of these food pantries rely on Excel or really pen and paper to keep track of all this inventory. And this lack of software can lead to duplicate households in the reports going back to the food banks, or even just not tracking the trends that are occurring in their own community, and once again, not allowing them to fully serve their community. And to touch on client choice, traditionally, a food pantry gives out a pre-packaged box of food, and the clients don't have a choice of what goes in. And client choice looks to dignify this experience, kind of mimicking what a grocery store has to offer, allowing these families to go in, peruse the shelves, and pick exactly what they want, exactly what they need for the week. And then shown here in this picture is what Rohan Allen and I use on a weekly basis here at Cal State Fullerton. So we meet our dietary needs. And we're looking to move away from just giving everyone the exact same bag that may be thrown away or left to rot, since the client might not know what it is, what to do with said item, or it just doesn't meet the dietary cultural needs. So we want to give the community a better experience, because currently the community is pretty abysmal experience. So the act of even finding a food pantry can be extremely difficult for them. And once they find it, even having the correct information, the correct hours can be a struggle. And what we've heard from food banks is that they have several clients that may travel several counties over to even receive aid. And once they get there, even if they're early, they may wait hours in line just to even get that aid. And across this whole ecosystem, we think we can make it better.
Our solution, Baguette, is software meant to unify these parties involved and assist in alleviating food insecurity. To paint a picture, we provide an automated volunteer scheduling tool that frees up time for staff significantly, allowing them to dedicate time on more pressing matters. On the other side, we have inventory management, which empowers pantries to keep a real-time database of current stock, which allows pantries to automatically generate monthly reports to immediately address deficiencies and help assist forecasting in the future for community needs. Additionally, a core component of Baguette is the unified repository of users to drastically improve the quality of user data in the space to know how to better serve them. Lastly, pantry users are given a simple way of reserving appointments to help ease the issue of crowding these sites and providing an improved pantry experience for the community. Now, I told you what Baguette is. Allow me to show you. The following is a glimpse of what Baguette is. Here, we see a preview of what these three parties will interact with. I should preface this by saying that these mockups were the very first iteration that we created for Baguette. And will undergo some drastic changes to reflect what we've drawn from our latest block of market research. With that in mind, our main goal with Baguette is to provide an accessible and easy way to essentially bridge these parties together in an intuitive manner. Let's take a little closer look at the food bank side of operations. What we see here is the food bank portal. There, they're able to receive automatically created reports from their partner pantries. And these reports take place of the current practice of relying solely on email and phone communication with a staff member in their operations in order to communicate the needs between shipments. Moreover, we have here the pantry side. Operational managers at pantries are able to create and manage client profiles for those that don't have access to devices or are not as tech savvy. Additionally, pantries are now given a local activity feed to provide urgent and necessary news to neighboring pantries or their clients to always keep them in the loop, such as a change of hours for holidays, fresh produce notices, etc. Finally, the most crucial part of Baguette is their inventory management. Here, pantries are able to keep track of their real-time stock and even process incoming and outgoing shipments by easily scanning them in and out with their phones. On the other hand, we have the guest portal, where guests such as people like you and me are able to find nearby pantries, relevant information about these places, and get alerted on food needs, appointments, and so much more. We're giving people the power to assist in alleviating their food insecurity.
So one aspect of these mockups, which we don't have fleshed out yet, is the volunteer handling system, simply because this has come up repetitively in recent times in our market research. We've yet to build this out. The reason we are going to be doing this is because we found that food banks frequently work with hundreds to thousands of volunteers in various capacities. And we have to provide them with times and liability forms and training documentation. So we're working on creating a single adaptable system dedicated to food bank operations around the country, which allows for such functionality so that you don't see forms like the one LA Regional uses today or other food banks, which do it manually. These take thousands of employee hours a year, and we're trying to eliminate that. So the Lord of the Rings fans in here, the one tool to rule them all. So the most important aspect of our operations is going to have to be driving adoption at some point. The way we have figured out would work best is to reach out to banks directly. Banks have, they're the ones with the best organization, resources, funding. We're going to be giving these software licenses directly to food banks for them to distribute into their network of partnered agencies or pantries. Typically, it's about 150 pantries in the network for each of these food banks. That's a lot of pantries. LA Regional, these very large banks, that it goes up to 600 pantries typically. So giving them the licenses to distribute to their partners would work really well because they're the ones who understand them the best. It also puts the monetary burden of handling the software on the bank itself as opposed to these neighborhood sites who would not be able to otherwise support that. We'll be providing trial access for them to ingratiate themselves with the software better and provide technical support and otherwise as well. We're also planning on reaching out directly to pantry users at community sites such as community centers and UBT offices and those pantry locations themselves. Adoption is going to be critical. We're just going to not spend too much time on this, but this is kind of like one of our first guiding technical documents. And we wanted to have you guys just take a peek at what it looks like for us when we're developing some of this stuff. This was just how the data interacts with each other on the back end. We've now created 3 of these. It's changed a lot since we first created this, but this is kind of how we visualized how this application works on the back end. Now, our development time frame, we're using the Agile philosophy. Essentially, it's all about breaking fast. We've split it into about 5 sprints, but this may change. We've given ourselves a 2-month frame for this. Having done this before, this is kind of how we see this playing out. Week 1, it's going to be just figuring out what features our MVP contains, doing the back end, and then the front end. There's going to be QA testing. That's the most important part by far, is putting this in the hands of the folks who are going to be using it and see where it fails. And then obviously the outreach and tutorial aspect at the very end. Now, this is kind of where we are right now in many ways, specific to the present day. We're operating under what's known as the lean startup methodology. Sounds fancy. I'm sure you might have heard of it casually even, but what it really is it's a modification of the scientific method. Right? It's repeatedly verifying our hypotheses, and if it's not the case, then pivoting. So pretty much every single time we have an interview with a pantry or food bank, we get together right after and consolidate what we found and see whether what we're hearing from them is correlating with what we have considered as our guiding hypotheses in this space. If something is not the case, if something is contradictory to what we find as being the truth, then we pivot. After having done this X number of times, what we have right now, we try and hold consistently. But we're very flexible so that we want to make sure we're addressing the problems that folks are actually facing and not what we think they're facing. And that's kind of why. Now, our market research is split into 2 phases. It's food bank interviews and food pantry interviews. Phase 1 being the banks. We've hit our initial quota of about approaching 20 banks now, but obviously it's over 300 banks in this country. We want to be hitting about 20% of that. So we're looking at 60 when everything is said and done. But pantries, we've started very recently. And very honestly speaking, it's been a big challenge for us because we find that pantries are such a different experience from banks. They're just not as coordinated, not as visible, if you will. They're very localized. And so oftentimes we have to talk to people who know people to get in touch with them and call. We've gone in person to several pantries already. So this is very much a work in progress, but as challenging as it is, we find it goes to rewarding and what we get from them. So the next steps is all around the application itself. We have to figure out what our core MVP offerings are going to be, limiting ourselves to probably something that around like 7 to 8 immediate critical features, figuring out what the tech stack for that looks like, and then eventually building it according to the time frame you saw earlier. Now, what's listed on here is really perhaps my favorite part of what we're doing or beginning to work on. Essentially, we'll be using a combination of historical demand data sets and freshly harvested usage data at pantry sites. Running that data through a commercial language model like GPT from OpenAI or Gemini from Google, and using a reliable forecasting algorithm to generate demand projections at pantry sites. What I mean by this is every week, every month, pantries receive shipments from their banks. They need to know what's going to be in those shipments, what they're critically short on. But the issue is there's a lot of banks out there that are turning to fresh produce as being the larger percentage of their shipments. San Francisco Food Bank, whom we spoke to recently, over 60% of the food that they ship out to their partnered agencies is fresh produce. This has a much shorter shelf life compared to canned items that were historically sent out. So in order for that to be optimized to the greatest extent possible and not wasted, because fresh produce goes bad quickly, they can't wait on pantries to give them the list of what they need or using that historical data. They actually would need projections. So receive projections of right now they need this the most and ship it out right away without waiting for them, so that the fresh produce can have the greatest shelf life possible and get into the hands of families who are actually using them. We're not reinventing the wheel here. These projections are done all the time in other industries, but it just hasn't been implemented in the food bank pantry space. Thankfully, we have found potential partners to work with us on this. The Data Science Alliance down in San Diego is working on specifically this with the San Diego Food Bank. So that's very promising for us. We're also planning on, we're exploring using route planning algorithms for delivery vehicles. We found in our research that this is a big problem. The whole cold chain transport system and getting the food on time to agencies, it's really ruining relationships currently. And we'd love to allow for smart notifications to keep agencies in loop with when deliveries are going to come in. But this is something that we're going to need cooperation in order to implement. Now, lastly, the big umbrella picture for all of this is the data analysis aspect of this. We're collecting so much data on various verticals, specifically the user side. This is information that is desperately wanted by food banks and state agencies. Information like how far is somebody traveling to get to the nearest pantry? What's the frequency of their visits? What is the family size? Demographic information. This is information that's not collected today and will be collected automatically by scanning in and scanning out through this application. And this information we need to have provided. We want to distribute this information to state agencies for them to utilize. And that's going to be a key focus for us moving forward. Lastly, our journey so far, just to quickly highlight, we've participated in several initiatives so far, and we've done fairly well. Started Cal State Fullerton, went to San Jose, and we're still continuing. Pando obviously is been big for us. It's been persistent through some of these. The team itself, my name is Rohan. I'm the technical product lead. Alan here is our front-end engineer. Caesar is our Scrum master, and I'm a chai guy. Caesar personally has an affinity for coffee, and Alan breads his thing. So on that note, we'd really like to thank you all for joining us for our presentation. Special thank you to Jeff, who's on call right now. He's our team mentor. Could not do any of this without his support. We meet with him on a weekly basis. He's as much of the team as any of us. Bernadette Legas is not here today. She kind of showed us the lay of the land. She's the coordinator for the Cal State Fullerton Pantry. So thank you to her as well. Thank you all. Thank you for having us.
Wow. Thank you. Your presentation makes me wish that I were one of the official respondents here. I have a list of questions that I'd love to ask you. It's a fascinating project and wonderful that this was done by you as students on your own initiative, seeking to meet a need. And it's extremely interesting. Carlos and Kai remain with us from Burrell Happold. Let's bring them back in and see what they think. Carlos, you go first.
Great presentation, guys. I enjoyed every one bit of it. I love the passion that you guys are bringing to this project. And I applaud you for taking this one on itself. One question I had for you guys, and you guys spoke about a single form that you guys want to create for multiple jurisdictions. I, as an engineer that have worked with multiple jurisdictions, would love there to be a single form every time. But it becomes more difficult, more challenging. How flexible are you guys willing to be with that one form, knowing that jurisdictions are going to be different from one end to the other?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is I think a form is probably an inefficient way of doing it. That's kind of how they've been doing it. Part of why we refer to it as a tooling mechanism is because we think we found this to be the same in the inventory as well. Is different sites have completely different inventory needs. So if we create one application with specific inventory features, it just doesn't work for somebody else. Kind of like what you're alluding to, different jurisdictions having different needs. So what we found would potentially work the best is allowing at the very time of creation of the form for them to choose the fields and the sizes of behind the fields, the number of respondents that it can support, and the various time fields. That is something that can be built from the start. We've created similar applications, which allows you to choose what it's going to look like and support it, the capacity it can support. We've created applications like that before, and we think that would allow for the flexibility you're referring to, where one food bank can choose, hey, we are not going to be dealing with thousands of volunteers. We kind of just need about 200 volunteers every week or every month. But we need for them to have different functionalities than maybe LA regional will have. We need for them to actually drive out and stuff and schedule for that. Those are fields that they can select at the time of the creation of the tool for them. They can basically choose what's listed and what the capacity behind each field is going to be. That's how we envision this being.
Beautiful. And and I imagine they all go to a similar database, and then all that data is collected by you guys.
Yeah. Thankfully, the DB aspect of it would be consistent, more or less, to the form of the data.
Beautiful. The one other question I had for you was, again, coming from a minority background, one of the things that always feared my family is putting their name down anywhere, putting their ID to something that was difficult. How would you allow people like my family, people like families that you probably know, to be able to sign up for this with some form of data, but not give up their identity as they see fit?
Yeah, I was just looking to see if we had it listed anywhere on here, and unfortunately, I think maybe we don't. But what you're saying is completely true. So we're in Orange County. Santa Ana is one of our big cities here. It's one of our largest minority cities. Alan actually lives in Santa Ana. I frequent it quite a bit. And one of the biggest problems is that the population that we deal with, the population that uses food pantries and banks, is a very vulnerable population, perhaps the most vulnerable in our community. And they are undocumented, or for whatever reason feel uncomfortable with providing their names, very much like you're saying. All the data that we'll be collecting is it's non-personally identifiable information. We'll be assigning essentially a QR code to them. Their names would not ever be collected at any point. Their addresses would be anonymized, so their specific house address would not be used. They're not even being asked for that. Really, the information that they're asked for is sort of like the grid that they live in, the neighborhood that they live in, essentially. They're just going to be given a serial code to assign to themselves, and then one form of association, whether it's phone number or email, which would need to be verified on a yearly basis to prevent duplication. Essentially, we don't want the same user represented twice. That's kind of one of the issues right now. So essentially, we'd be getting the benefits of having them in our system, but without it being tied to their person, no personally identifiable information. We completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah. How would you spread that word yourself personally to make sure that more people sign up? Because
Yeah,
coming from my background, we hear that and we trust you, but we also take a step back as well.
That's a fantastic point. I don't think we've given it the thought necessary as to specifically how we're going to disseminate that information. But I can certainly tell you that the moment they scan the QR code to actually sign up, not once will they see something asking for their name or anything that you might be iffy about providing. But that's a fantastic point. And I'd be lying if I say we have a plan laid out. We have to figure out how to communicate with it.
Thank you guys. You guys, great presentation. Hi.
Thank you.
Hi, yeah, I agree. It's incredible. It's going to be so critical for a lot of people, and I'm really excited to see it potentially implemented in the future. I had a question. Whenever you were speaking with food banks and food pantries, did you ever encounter resistance to change, or maybe do you see the obstacle in getting, a large decentralized network all onto a uniform program, and how do you intend to tackle that?
Yeah, we definitely do.
Yeah, we've kind of seen it across the board. There's one in Northern California that kind of comes to mind immediately where the food pantries that they have in the network are in some sense so resistant to change and the evolution of software that they've asked their food bank, can we send in our reports by mail? So having to show the food banks, the food pantries, that this will increase the amount of reach, what they're capable of, is going to be a whole education part on its own. And on the other hand, we've also talked to some food banks like down in San Diego, that they're very much on the tech focus, where they're working with like the Data Science Alliance to try to push that forward. So kind of having testimonials on both sides will help us bring in more food banks into our network and share that. By sharing information with each other, we're going to be able to accomplish a lot more.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally, the most what we found works at the end of the day is showing them why it's necessary. For example, if we're trying to reduce duplication in user information to get an accurate picture of the people we're serving, it can actually lead to some resistance, and it has led to resistance because if a food bank is able to tell the state government or the county of Orange that they're serving 1 million people every month, that helps them get funding and grants sized to 1 million people. But if we push through with this and get really accurate information on the people we're serving, and it turns out to be 700,000 people as opposed to 1 million people because 300,000 accounts were duplicated, then that actually could mean less funding for them coming from the state agencies. And it's ironic because now you have really accurate information, you have more in-depth information on these folks, but the fact that it's a smaller number is something they might not appreciate. And we've been informed as much from some of our community partners. But the only way we could tackle that is to show them why it's still beneficial to push through with that, because yes, it's less people, but now you know so much more about where they're coming from and the background information. You can quite literally personalize your offerings to those families, leads them to having a better experience. One of the biggest things we're finding is it could very potentially reduce the social stigma around going to a pantry as a breadwinner, having to get food from a pantry to put on the table for your family. It's a little bit of a terrible experience right now. You have to wait in line and stuff, but through allowing for client choice, you can place an appointment and go get the food that you want. The benefits is what we have to emphasize anytime we're presenting this information, is what we've found, even though there is some pushback on things like getting accurate user information. And that's the only way we've seen about being able to go about this, is to show them why.
I see. Your team is just so thoughtful and thick with their answers. I really appreciate it. It's very inspiring.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, yeah, extremely interesting. Just one very quick question, 20 seconds. What is your funding model? And are you wanting to do this, as a not-for-profit, or is this a profit venture, or how are you? Both are completely acceptable. Just curious, kind of how you're thinking about it.
No, absolutely. We're thinking about this as being a SaaS model. It's going to have to be, I mentioned licenses briefly. That's kind of what we're considering, is that 150 agencies associated with the food bank Maybe let's say 2/3 of them are able to support the software. It's 100 agencies. There'd be a license for each one. We found our per agency cost, if not taken to scale, is coming to around $30 a pantry. We could push that down to $20 without too much effort, but that's still a cost for us to bear, and that includes everything. So what we're going to have to do is charge the food bank to support this cost. Thankfully, they often have tech grants, tech funding earmarked to support tech upgrades and stuff. We found that it is well within the means of these food banks to support the software. It'd be replacing some of the software they use existingly as well. They're having to pay for significantly cheaper than what Cal State Fullerton pays today. They pay thousands of dollars. This would cost a fraction of that. So the model would be one of licenses and handled by the banks and not the pantries themselves. We are considering a for-profit model as being more sustainable right now.
Once again, terrific. Thank you so much. So now we've seen 3 Pando Days premier presentations this morning, and we have one left, UCLA.